Match number 5 of the day, and it's going to be Alutemu on Mage versus tom60229 on the Warrior. And in their previous meeting, Alutemu actually 2-0'd Tom, the previous world champ, and he's got an opportunity to maybe even do it again. So let's take a look at the deck list and see what's going to go on here.
Yeah, for Tom, yet another Bomb Warrior. We've seen it in nearly every match of the day simply because of the power level of the deck. And I think it was just an overall safe bring going into the post-buffs meta.
Yeah.
And Tom here hasn't had the best luck with it in the mirror. Or perhaps some people might say he took too much damage when he was playing against Frosty, but I'm sure he will clean it up a little bit more for today. And so Town Crier as the one of in the deck, that's usually something that people argue about whether it's better to have one or two. And outside of Geppetto in the main deck, I don't see too much to note.
Yeah, and I also think in general in this matchup specifically, the card I mainly look out for is Weapons Project in the primary deck, whether it has it or not, because against Mage there are some threatening minions that you really want to clean up and basically not just dissuade your opponent from actually even playing them. We've seen some mages, and I think we saw Alutemu do it when he played on Friday, just drop a Sorcerer's Apprentice on 2 and say, well, it's not 100% safe, but it's pretty safe.
I think he did that in both of those games despite his opponent, I can't quite remember who, but his opponent was running Weapons Project, and he still did it. So now Alutemu is going to be even more incentivized to play just a tempo Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Exactly, and speaking of him and his list, we can take a look now, and very similar to the Conjurer's Mage or Cyclone Mage we've been seeing for a while now, but with the inclusion of that Luna's Pocket Galaxy, which was buffed from 7 mana to 5, which is actually a huge buff. And the big deal here is it's not make or break the deck at all, but that one card in there sometimes allows you to do. The deck does silly stuff, but that card allows you to do really stupid things because unlike Geppetto, it doesn't reduce the stats of your minions or anything you draw. It just makes them cost 1 no matter what. So Antonidas, Giants become 0 mana because of the way the Giant interactions work. Anything, you can just play a whole turn's worth of stuff post Luna's Pocket Galaxy. It's insane.
And you can also see with the inclusion of Polymorph, I think Alutemu himself expected more mages to be run in the just in the field of APAC this week, because Polymorph is a nod to the mirror, I'm pretty sure, to have a clean answer to a Giant on curve, which is these days turn 4 is Giant on curve.
Yeah, and again, in terms of the way this matchup gets played out with Mage versus Warrior, there are differing ways and opinions on how to play it out. But I know not too long ago, Firebat was saying in Grandmasters that he believes it's just 100% tempo. You just need to play your stuff out as quickly and aggressively as possible and have your opponent have to, instead of doing their own thing, pushing damage, just be able to actually even try and deal with some of these minions, especially when you look at Mountain Giants. And I think on primary lists, that's even more true because cards along the lines of Big Game Hunter and maybe even just text like Weapon Projects and Shield Slams are just going to happen less often.
It's true. And we can see from the sideboard from Tom in his tertiary, it's meant for Mage with a double BGH and Super Collider. So maybe that's a bit more of the old school thinking of how you're supposed to tech against Mage, because nowadays people are going for more tempo, as you said. But for now, we're going to see what's up with the primary lists, and the Giant is already available for Alutemu along with Arcane Intellect. That seems like a pretty solid hand, but Tom's hand is no slouch itself.
Yeah, just having the Rover actually available means that there's a chance Tom can stack up so a little bit of extra armor and maybe get those shield slams down.
Extra calling, but also there. Okay, calling is insane, obviously, but I think it's worth just looking at Spellbender just because of how Shield Slam interacts with Giants as being one of the premium answers against it.
I think if there was a calling already in hand, Spellbender would have been way more of a consideration. But this, instead of really discovering Conjurer's Calling, Alutemu's, you normally read that as draw Conjurer's Calling with that magic trick instead.
True.
Because you don't care about having more, you just care about having at least one, especially when you've already got the Giant.
And Tom not even bothering to hero power there because he knows he needs to try and be the aggressor, quote unquote, in this matchup. And it can be supported by this type of curve with Clockwork Goblin, but I think he'd much rather have an Omega Devastator than these reactive cards for the follow-up.
Yeah, also as well, there's just side benefit of thinning the deck a little bit with the one drop, and I'm just looking at Alutemu's hand and trying to. What you've got to do with this Mage deck is basically piece together like a 3-turn plan. because there's nothing that Alutemu can really do right now. That could play Luna and freeze the Goblin. It would draw a card, which isn't bad. It would make the Giant cheaper, which isn't bad.
I'm looking at perhaps Banana Buffoon and just using a banana, but that seems probably worse than Luna.
Maybe we just put Luna down and make Tom kill it. And that sounds really stupid and dumb, but you've drawn a card, so you've made up the difference because Ray of Frost is a twin spell, which means you get a second version of it anyway. You keep your card count high, as well as putting minions on the board and things on the board that Tom has to deal with, which means your Giant later is more likely to live.
Yeah. I think Alutemu might be interested in having a Giant Conjurer's turn later on. So next turn would still not be that turn on 5 mana. In which case he just wants to keep his hand as full as possible. So it looks like he actually is going for Buffoon and
so he just doesn't play a banana, right? Gonna freeze the 3/3.
Yeah. Okay, so this still keeps his hand at 9 cards.
Yep.
Defend the gates.
So the monkey's gonna get killed. This is a reasonable amount of damage, but most importantly I feel is, well, one, that Nova's not bad, but also one Militia Commander gone that Alutemu knew was there means that a lot of the time Militia Commander makes up the difference in damage on board to kill a Giant. And now it can't. There's one gone, so he already knows there's one down.
Alutemu's hovering over Mirror Image into Sea Giant, which seems like on paper good, but he's using 2 cards, which means that next turn Giant and Conjurers would not be available for him. But so going for this play means he's banking on the Sea Giant sticking as the Conjurers target next turn. So now we need to think about how likely it is for this to stick. Something like Warpath would be, I think, a nightmare for Alutemu because the rest of the stuff can just trade into the Sea Giant.
Brawl would be a problem.
Does Tom really want to brawl this though?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that's why Alutemu's done it. It's just a little bit tricky to deal with because of the minions on board. I think Alutemu's also potentially happy at just waiting and playing a bit of a later game because he knows he can Giant Conjurers. He's already past the point that playing a Giant on curve isn't doable because Tom had such a good opening. So now he's just like, well, if I Giant Conjures, what is my opponent realistically going to do?
So Tom instead is going to try and consolidate his board while pushing damage.
Most importantly, that Giant's alive.
Yep. So ping value trade and Conjurer's Calling is possible, but the ping seems rather expensive here.
What if you just hit, freeze, and then Conjurers?
In that case, you'd still have the 2 mana, so you might as well ping anyway, right?
Oh, I meant Nova.
Oh, okay.
To just lock everything out, you took the shield off, and then you can just go next turn. The Big Bad Archmage is awesome because it's not only 1 minion, it is 2, and a lot of 6 drops are taunts in the game right now. Which means that it's reasonably likely that a taunt comes up to protect these big minions anyway.
Worth noting that you can't get Mulch Muncher off of the Conjurers anymore. Wow, that's a newly buffed minion.
Yeah, it's kind of a taunt.
Yeah, this is looking pretty bad for Tom here. There's also still 2 Giants for Alutemu to use the second half of the Conjurers on. Should Tom brawl this board, and it looks like he's going to be forced
I think he has to.
Yeah.
This
I like
is
the ordering
nice.
as well.
And even before that, he had, what, 4 out of 6 chance for it to be okay to good. He either wins or the rover sticks, which is fine. That's doable.
And he just wins now with the best minion as well. But Alutemu has...
Again.
Yeah, he goes again. And Antonidas with a bunch of 1-cost spells later on. However, he is on 18 health, and there's no reliable way to heal in this mage deck outside of the Ziliax.
I'm so
Coin Shield Slam this turn as well, which is, it always feels good to do this when you know that the second half of Conjurers has been used already. However, that was the discovered Conjurer, so Tom is probably still worried about the natural ones coming into play.
So now, Yeah, I was going to say just going more aggressive, whether it's the Sea Giant or even Archmage Antonidas into a banana. You've just seen Brawl, you've just seen Boom Shield Slam, you can remove tons of armor with the attack. Maybe that wouldn't have been so bad, but the Giant does a very similar job to Antonidas anyway, and Antonidas could be insane the second an Apprentice is drawn next turn.
Yeah.
Or from next turn onwards, I mean.
And the problem with the Warrior is that they just do not run single target tall removal before turn 10.
Yeah.
And
this
what
is a
the shield
nightmare.
slam has been used already.
Look at the damage, it's insane.
With the draw of the Mana Cyclone now, I think
Oh, I like
Alutemu
it.
has to think about at least whether he puts some of these one-cost spells for the Antonidas turn and some for the Mana Cyclone. Granted, the magic trick could get Evocation,
Yeah, I
and
think
you
just-
can have both.
Well, I think double banana.
Yeah.
You gain 2 fireballs. These minions clearly Tom cannot deal with. It's turn 9 next turn, which means he can't Omega Devastate or anything. What does Tom do? Peel all the armor away, and then there's 2 fireballs.
He cries unless he draws the second Brawl.
Yeah, look, it's so sick.
Yeah, of course it's very low odds of getting exactly Elemental Evocation, so might as well play a Banana, which gets the extra 1 damage in while it's guaranteed. So Tom has a draw with the shield block. It has to be exactly Brawl into winning the Brawl, because I think any one of these minions surviving that isn't
not
the
it?
commander is GG.
That's
So,
just game.
yep.
It's insane, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where although you've always got to consider discovers, the difference between him getting that Conjurer's Call in was just you draw a Conjurer's Call in,
Exactly.
because he didn't draw any of his natural ones that game, which means that discovered one basically cracked that game wide open for Alutemu, and it means he goes 1-0 in a refreshingly quick game from the ones we've had today, and that's just the kind of power where he went through a early minion start without Sorcerer's Apprentice response. Then he got the Sea Giant down, which did live, which was probably the game-winning play from that point. But he went through that, he went through a Brawl, and he still just had enough. And when the deck goes, it really, really goes. And I think reasons like Alutemu's games this weekend showing why a lot of people were surprised that only himself in Asia Pacific was the only player to bring Mage.
Although in the other regions, I hear there's some controversy going around how good Mage actually is. But for APAC's purposes, at least when you're heading up against a bunch of Bomb Warriors, I think it's a good bring from Alutemu. And he's also got a Tertiary to help shore up the matchup even more when the Bomb Warrior moves to their anti-Mage list.
Yeah, he does. It's kind of... It's super interesting to me. So the list from Tom, if you've been following Grandmasters, really is the usual, almost common Warrior anti-Mage list, which is just 2 BGH, 2 Super Gliders, and there's a Spellbreaker in there. Sometimes that card changes around depending, but overall it's 2 Super Gliders and 2 Big Game Hunters to obviously help with the multiple big minions, as well as just kit sniping off Giants on curve. Alutemu has actually gone Messenger Raven, Sandbinder, 2 Twilight Drakes, and a Harrison. And all of these things, most importantly, fly under the radar of a Big Game Hunter and don't really interact with the Super Gliders either, because even if you Twilight Drake and Twilight Drake, they don't kill each other most of the time.
Yeah.
So I feel like the tertiaries just counter, just straight away. Alutemu's counters Tom's pretty hard, and he only loses 2 Novas, which, yeah, they're good cards, but not the end of the world against Warrior. Like the 1 Polymorph and the 2 Sea Giants, and Sea Giants versus Warrior, they don't often go as wide as Tom went in the game, for example.
Yeah, I think you mentioned all the salient points there, and I also just want to say that Alutemu, I think with the Mage Bring, specifically for APAC, was a very smart read. I think a lot of people were worried in APAC specifically about going up against newer mech decks, Paladin or
Right.
something like that, and so they had these sideboards for with things like Silence and EMP Operatives I've also seen.
Yes.
While that is a very respectful thing to bring, I think Alutemu recognized that with so little time to test, maybe people are just going to default to the safest brings, which
good
is
stuff.
Bomb Warrior.
Yeah, and let's take a
Mage
look at the
Pizza.
list now, as we do have confirmation that they are on the tertiary list. And there's Tom's. I mean, we saw something similar of like the anti-warrior list with the barista in the secondary, but that tertiary not too mind-blowing. He loses the weapon tech, loses the rovers, and some of the middle minions that don't really get a lot of work done. And then gains that hard removal. But if we can move on to Alutemu's, I do want to also talk about Alutemu's secondary list because it's super heads up for me. Mage is a really good deck. Like this mage is awesome, I think. And if your deck's really good and you can make it better against decks that can do well versus it, then also the secondary list makes it good against a deck that beats it, which is Holy Wrath Paladin. So he gains the 2 Spellward Jewelers, Bounce Effect, and Research Project, which is just nice tech against Holy Wrath. So I just think it's a super well-built all 3 decks for me.
Yeah, I think maybe the only consideration is that it doesn't have tech against other slightly bad matchups like Hunter and Rogue, which people still argue about how bad it actually is for the mage, but I think Alutemu probably had just a good read that Hunter would not be so popular this week. Rogue is reasonably popular, but maybe not among his specific opponents.
And I think as well that like the double Nova in the main list, along with all the usual suspects and Sea Giants, can be enough to get you done versus aggro decks. Like, yeah, it might be a little bit tough, but I don't think it's the end of the world either. So I don't know. I think this is one of the better builds of the overall inclusive of secondary and tertiary that I've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, going all in against Holy Wrath Paladin, I don't see a better way to do it than this. And maybe this is the type of tech that you can't quite do for a bigger tournament like Vegas, for example, because suddenly people are going to be bringing way more of a variety of stuff and you can't quite go so all in on teching against one thing. But even though Alutemu didn't hit a Holy Wrath Paladin, and that's much to my dismay because I really want to see how that secondary actually interacts with it, how consistently
if it works,
yeah, you can rely on the Spellward Jewelers. But in any case, he still got a tertiary for a matchup he did hit, so good on him.
Yeah, and like I said, not only is it just, it helps the matchup, it actually kind of negates a lot of the power or flies, you know, around the power of the counter deck that Tom was playing anyway. So let's just get straight into it. Game number 2, and as you can see there next to the players' names, Alutemu is currently, or at least more or less, leading the pack in his division, whereas Tom is much in the middle ground here. So if Alutemu takes the win, he goes 7-1,
yeah,
which is an extremely impressive result so far, and matching the best of APAC.
He would be the division leader and also tied with Shaxi because Don did take a loss. If you look a little bit more right of that number, you would have seen the Luna's Pocket Galaxy kept in the mulligan as well as a Conjurer's Calling. And I'm so happy to see this come into play because I don't think he has played it throughout any of his games yet this week. So
and this is where I need APX Void on speed dial because I already want to know if that is deemed a standard keep of the Lunar Pocket Galaxy.
On coin? And with no other minions?
So honestly, I've not played tons of the Luna, the newest version of this list, because outside of Luna, it's very similar of the actual deck, so it's a little bit lower on my priority.
He does draw the Antonidas, though, and I would say that's the premium target for the Galaxy to hit, even more so than the Giants, but any of the Giants costing 1 mana is pretty good. Although he did cut the Sea Giants.
I mean, he cut everything for more minions, so his Harrison is 1 mana.
Sure, Twilight Drakes.
His Twilight Drakes are 1 mana, so it's exceptionally powerful. I would just like to hear more views on if it's a mulligan keep, or how much of a keep it is. Like, do you 100% keep it no matter your hand, and so on, so on. It is all this. So I'm going to give APX a quick message after this, I guess.
All right. So Alutemu was already presented with the option if he wants to coin it going into that turn, but using the coin all willy-nilly when you have this hand that can really go off with Apprentice and Mana Cyclone seems a bit dicey, so I like that he's going for this instead. He just needs to be a bit aware of the hand space, I suppose.
Yeah, it should end up being okay though, because of the 2 minions that are played don't get regenerated in spells, which means there should be enough space even with the double usage of the twin spell.
Yes.
So he always goes to 9 if he does it this way.
Saves coin as well. I think it is just more valuable than a random spell for sure. And unfortunately for Alutemu, Tom had the Warpath as an answer, but then Alutemu can take the turn.
Anything but a minion Alutemu wants to see right now.
This card
it was
looks
highly likely it was going to be a minion.
This card looks really pretty in gold as well. Look at that animation.
It's pretty cool.
So now Mountain Giants cost essentially 0 when they enter the hand.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is, although Alutemu did draw a minion, Luna can start drawing many many cards, because if you start chaining, well, one, a lot of the cards in his deck are quite low cost anyway, but then when you transfer all the minions to 1 costs, you can just almost draw your full deck, or up to the amount of mana you have.
I will say though that Alutemu's hand is quite awkward. He doesn't have the giants that he wants to use the Conjurer's Callings on. And the Mana Cyclone being the rightmost card is not something you want to cycle with Luna because it won't get the value. So I'm even looking at maybe either Scorch or Cinderstorm to empty the hand a bit, and then Astral Rift perhaps? Or
He's gonna do this in
The
Cinder.
future is
Oh,
ours.
fine. Scotch. Or maybe just go in on the Mana Cyclone.
he could coin Astral Rift, and if he gets a 2-drop, he could draw off of it, but then there's still the hand space issue, right? So maybe just rip the Cinderstorm and say, okay, the Luna's just not going to get value this game. It feels real awkward, though.
Yeah, I feel like if he's done this, you just go into this. Yeah,
Okay.
because this draws a card, generates a spell. The card you draw is likely to be a minion, which means you can play that as well, and so on, so on, so on.
Behold the
There you go.
Wow, okay.
There you go. See, that's what you do. Look at the smile. He's done this before.
creation.
There was some hesitation on the turn, but ultimately, Super Collider is still going to come in handy here.
Yeah, Tom can clean this up. But the big question is, can he clean it up and deal with Luna?
I'm
'Cause
going
if
to
not,
say no.
he's down for another turn of what just happened. But
Oh wait, he
probably
can do
quicker.
this in Warpath. Yes, and that would clean up the Luna.
Yeah, I think he has to kill Luna after seeing her galaxy.
You've seen Luna, you've seen what's in her pocket.
Yep.
Well, has he really though? There's still another giant in there. And from Tom's perspective, there could very well be a 1-mana Antonidas waiting in the deck, and that is the biggest threat out of all of them, I think. So Alutemu, he hasn't seen a Brawl, but he's seen both Warpath, so I wonder if he'd be tempted to go something like Khadgar, Buffoon, and conjure the Buffoon. Because he's got the second Conjure in hand.
Yeah, that wouldn't be so bad, would it? I was looking at just initially Conjurers onto the 2-drop, but yeah, Conjurers 3 drops. A little bit better, and it also means you're not going to hit a potential Doomsayer. Which, yes, caster bingo. When 2 drops can be summoned, Doomsayers get discussed. But when you go in this deep onto a board, Doomsayer is a thing. And if you can avoid it, you probably just should, is my point.
So he's gonna go for this, get 4 3-drops, probably 2 of them get cleaned up by Super Collider, or they all have stealth, who knows? Oh, Commander Risa? Okay, attacking the rightmost Risa will definitely kill something along with the Risa. Okay. The use of the banana surprises me a little bit because he has Antonidas in hand. But maybe he wants to use more, take up less hand space so that he can go for Arcane Intellect
And
next turn.
there are enough spells anyway, right? Because if you think it's going to always be with a Sorcerer's Apprentice, well, already there's 3 spells that can be played, and that's 3 fireballs, and 3 fireballs is often enough, speaking of which.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that's getting saved for the Antonidas turn.
Well, can't you just do the Antonidas turn now?
It
you
could
can push-
just die to the bond.
But you can push 14, which puts your opponent to 10. And you have 2 fireballs.
Okay.
So you win unless there's exactly full
Sure,
clear shield
okay,
block, or Dr. Boom with a full clear. That's the big
Yeah.
thing, right? This whole board needs to be cleaned up, and there needs to be armor gain.
It's a fair point. And the Shooting Star also deals with a bunch of the bombs, so
Right.
the more that I look at it,
And there's still
more sense it makes.
there's still Cinderstorm. There's not Ping next turn, but there's still Arcane Intellect. There's still Conjurer's Calling for something next turn. Like I like this overall.
Yeah, and with the banana.
Oh, you actually put him to 9, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's super strong. Good
Yeah,
catch.
I think you just
Raven.
go in. You're not being 30'd this turn. Make Tom have to do tons of things that he does not want to do.
There's a potential for disaster with Brawl, but it's significantly reduced by having the Shooting Star remove a couple bombs this early.
Okay, decent bombs. But still, this is a big ask, and these bombs have to do more than they can possibly do, I guess. The swing of the Super Glider is very important.
Ooh, and Tom misses a damage hero power. Either Zap Cannon or Kaboom there would have been pretty
Yeah.
useful.
I guess he swings into the Sorcerer's Apprentice.
So he can trade off the 5/4 with the Blastmaster Boom, and then that would guarantee that the Apprentice kills no matter which minion it hits.
But you can always
Yeah,
just
yeah.
put like the 1/2 in anyway, right? Because the
Okay,
1/2 probably dies this no matter what.
Okay.
I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, same outcome, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I guess this actually works out being fine.
Oh,
Oh, it's going to do
gonna-
this.
Okay. I guess
Um,
going for the Boombot trades while there are more minions on board makes more sense than going for the Super Collider first, because he needed
But-
the
but
Boombot
now
to
he
kill
takes
at
more
least one thing.
damage.
But
look at this now.
I think he was looking for the high roll of having every minion removed, and I think if he was going for that scenario, it had to happen in this order for the best outcome.
That's just game.
Yep.
Could not clear it all off. Really sick play, and that Luna's Galaxy did end up helping out quite a lot in terms of how that game panned out there. That giant draw was huge.
That was over in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, I mean,
That
we
was
are
game 2.
speeding up towards the end of the day, as that was match number 5. But Alutemu 2-0s Tom, and that's 4-0 for Alutemu versus Tom in this season of Grandmasters. So he has to be very, very happy about that, and he continues to assert dominance over Division A.
I do think
in
he
the
also
Asia
went.
Pacific Grandmasters.
Yeah, I do think he also went 4-0 in game score this weekend, which
Oh
is
yeah, because he 2-0'd yesterday.
yeah, which is really
yeah.
impressive, and I'm just glad we got to see the Pocket Galaxy in action there at the very end.
Yeah, maybe Alutemu showing everyone that, yeah, you should have brought a good deck like Mage. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it would have worked out pretty well. But that's match number 5, and it is Sunday. We've got one more coming up. We've got Surrender versus Staz to finish the game. We're going to find out if Secret Hunter can get any work done at all this weekend. We'll be right back.